Santa Fe has always been a small town with a big reputation, attracting people from all walks of life. Many are drawn to the physical beauty of its high mountain desert. The quaint adobe architecture and temperate weather are also enticing. But mostly it's the muddle of humanity that keeps life interesting. Long before Santa Fe was dubbed the city different during the middle of the last century, its small population was already a microcosm of a bigger reality. The British photographer J. Dudley Johnston was born in Liverpool, England. In 1868, he was a curator of the Royal Photography Society for 30 years and was twice elected president of the organization. A man of many talents, Johnston was also the director of the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra. He specialized in landscape photography and found his way to America in the 1940s, where he captured the spirit of the Southwest. Elizabeth Foster drove her friend Brenda Putnam on a camping trip in the Southwest in 1924. Foster was the nurse who cared for the photographer Lord Gilpin during the 1918 flu epidemic. Putnam went on to become a noted sculptor whose work has been exhibited around the world. The American archaeologist Alfred Vincent Kidder, seen on the left, did groundbreaking work in the southwestern part of the United States and Mesoamerica. He became an expert in the ancient Anasazi culture and provided an archaeological timescale that continues to be used by scholars and researchers today. In 1950, the American Anthropological Association Institute gave Alfred Kidder the Eminence Award in the field of American anthropology in honor of his contributions. The American archaeologist Sylvanas G Morley is believed to have been the inspiration for the fictional archaeological Indiana Jones created by the movie producers George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Morley began his lifelong adventures in 1907 in Santa Fe, where he worked for the School of American Archaeology. George Hay, seen in this 1907 photograph on Palace Avenue, was a frequent visitor to Santa Fe at the turn of the 20th century. Hay founded the Museum of the American Indian in New York City in 1916. His collection became the largest and most comprehensive in the world, with over 1 million objects crafted by the indigenous inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere. Originally called the National Museum of the American Indian, it was transferred to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. in 1989. Charles Fletcher Loomis, seen on the right, introduced to New Mexico to the larger world through magazine articles and books. In 1907, Loomis founded the Southwest Museum in Los Angeles and continued his work in preserving the rights of Native Americans. Ralph Emerson Twitchell was a member of the Special Counsel for the U.S. Department of the Interior working to secure Native American water rights. For 43 years, he was a member of the legal department of the Santa Fe Railroad. During his lengthy career, Twitchell was also a prosecuting attorney for Santa Fe County. Mabel Dodge Lujan was born in Buffalo, New York, to a family of great wealth and privilege. As a young woman, she lived in Europe and in New York, where she became known as a patron of the arts and confidant of the intelligentsia. She moved to Taos, New Mexico in 1919 and started a literary colony that included the English author D.H. Lawrence. She also befriended the artist Georgia O'Keeffe and the photographer Ansel Adams, among other well-known artists of the 20th century. Ernie Pyle was an American journalist and a World War II correspondent who was awarded a Pulitzer Prize in 1945 for his column depicting the trials and tribulations of American soldiers. His home in Albuquerque became the first branch library of the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Library System. The anthropologist Edgar Lee Hewitt came to Santa Fe from Greeley, Colorado in 1893 in search of medical help for his wife, Cora Whitford, who suffered from tuberculosis. In 1906, he secured the support of the U.S. Congress in passing the Antiquities Act, which made it illegal to pillage ancient ruins. In 1907, he founded the School of American Archaeology, which is now called the School of Advanced Research. 2 years later, in 1909, he founded the Museum of New Mexico, where his ashes are interred today. President Teddy Roosevelt visited Santa Fe in 1903 with a special ceremony held on the Santa Fe Plaza. Prior to his presidency, Roosevelt established the Rough Riders, a diverse group of men comprised from the Southwest that helped fight against Spain and their dominance in Cuba. Queen Frederica of Greece visited Santa Fe after World War II with her daughter, Princess Sofia. In 1962, the princess married her third cousin, Juan Carlos of Spain. In 1975, he became the king, and she became Queen Sofia of Spain. The architect Frank Lloyd Wright designed more than 1,000 buildings in his lifetime, 2 of which can be found in New Mexico. In 1948, he constructed a house for Arnold Friedman in Pecos, New Mexico. He was also commissioned by newspaperman Lloyd Burlingham in 1942 to build a house in Santa Fe. The house had not been completed when Wright died in 1959. When the house was finished, it was known as the Pottery House. It's located on Hyde Park Road, abutting the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The famed aviator Charles A. Lindbergh visited Santa Fe in 1927, the same year that he made the first solo transatlantic flight from New York to Paris in his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. In 1929, he took aerial photographs of Chaco Canyon and other important archaeological sites of the Southwest. In 1903, Mary Austin wrote the classic The Land of Little Rain about the people, terrain, and spirituality of the West. When Austin came to Santa Fe in 1918, she founded the Santa Fe Little Theater, which today is the oldest theater west of the Mississippi. Also seen in this photo is Ernest Thompson Seton, who wrote 40 books on wildlife and nature. In 1933, he built Seton Village Castle, southeast of Santa Fe, which became a National Historic Landmark in 2005. Lew Wallace was the governor of New Mexico from 1878 to 1881. In 1880, he wrote the book Ben-Hur, considered by some to be the most important Christian book of the 19th century. The English author D.H. Lawrence on a visit to Santa Fe. He and his wife Frida lived in Taos from 1922 to 1925. Lawrence died in 1930 in France at the age of 45. His ashes were later brought to New Mexico, where they are interred at the D.H. Lawrence Ranch, 18 miles northwest of Taos. In April of 1945, a Saudi Arabian delegation visited Santa Fe for the first time. In the late 19th century, the Englishman and entrepreneur Fred Harvey helped to define Southwest hospitality with the help of young, refined women he hired to work as waitresses at his Harvey House chain of restaurants and hotels along railways from Kansas to California. Known as the Harvey Girls, their legacy became synonymous with the lore and lure of the West. MGM Studios made the movie The Harvey Girls in 1946, starring Judy Garland and Angela Lansbury, which forever solidified the fame of legions of young women that helped tame the image of the Wild West. Beverly Ireland and her identical twin sister Burnett Jarvis worked as Harvey Girls at La Fonda in 1955. The twins were hired at La Fonda because of their previous experience waitressing at the Jolly Green Giant Factory restaurant in Minnesota. As Harvey Girls, the two young sisters got to know all of the politicians, writers, artists, and the movie stars who were guests at La Fonda.